For a moment, forget everything you think you know about Bitcoin. Forget everything you've heard about blockchain. And let's start from basics.
Hello and welcome to On Books. This is Chris here, and up at the top that was Andreas Antonopoulos talking about how to start understanding Bitcoin. And that's what we are going to do in this episode. I am bringing you his latest book, The Internet of Money, and this is one of my top 5 picks of the past year. I'm counting down the top five books of last year, what they meant to me, basically. And this will start us off with number 5 this week. And this is The Internet of Money. So The Internet of Money, it's about 133 pages long, and it's comprised of 11 talks that Andreas did between 2013 and 2016. He's given 200 talks. He talks about in the beginning of the book. He's given 200 talks. These are 11 of his favorite that he transcribed and kind of cleaned up for a way that you can read them. You know, they're readable, they're fun, they're about 4 or 5 pages each, and it's pretty great. This book, it also has really high ratings on Amazon. I was pretty impressed. Lots of people saying it's fantastic introduction to Bitcoin, really good primer on blockchain, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to bring you the best of this book and more or less in the next 15 minutes convince you that you need to read it, that it's awesome, or maybe you'll just get enough from this episode where you'll say, hey, I feel pretty good. I feel like I got the gist of this book. So we're going to jump into that. There'll be 2 parts of this. There'll be the first part. We'll look at what is Bitcoin, and I'll be giving you some readings from the book and kind of summarizing his main idea of what is Bitcoin. And then in the second part, we'll look at what are the benefits of Bitcoin to the world. And I'll break that down with the top 4 benefits from the book, put those together. And of course, we'll have readings throughout the book so that by the end of this, you have a pretty good sense of what is Bitcoin and why does it matter? That's why we're here. So if that sounds good, stick around and we are going to get right into it. So the reason that I am selecting this as the number 5 book of the past year is because I really believe in the value and the proposed value for the future that Bitcoin and the underlying technology of blockchain are bringing us. I'm really excited about it. I've been teaching this at Columbia University the past year and at 1 month online. And this book really, I feel like when I found this book, when I was doing my research kind of early on, I feel like this book, the way that Andreas explains it, really helped crystallize it in a way that my students could also really get because he just has such a clear way of speaking. And you can watch any of his videos online if you want. He has just tons of free material on YouTube, so that's a great place to go. But if you want it in a book form, I feel like this is just a really quick way to kind of get the gist of it. And we're going to start with what is Bitcoin, because that's kind of a theme throughout many of his talks. Like, what is it? You know, you heard him say, let's start from moment zero. And I think that's important because it's good to know that you're likely confused a little bit about what Bitcoin or blockchain is. You've probably heard about it, maybe you've heard the names, but you don't fully know. And I'll be honest with you, there's a lot to get with this. I went to a conference in San Francisco, a Bitcoin conference over the summer, and Naval Ravikant, who is one of the founders of AngelList, and he speaks a lot about Bitcoin as well, he said to the audience, he said, if I polled everyone in this room, if I asked you, what is Bitcoin? We would get 100 different answers, right? So he says, if you're confused, that's fine, because there's so many different sides of this and it's tricky, right? So I'm just giving you the sense of like, just do your best and try to follow along and ask lots of questions. And this is going to be changing between now and the next few years. It's as big as kind of the internet. If you asked what was the internet, actually, one of my favorite things online is this video from 1994. It's the Today Show, and they're trying to figure out what is the internet. And I'll just play it for you right now.
Oh, that's that little mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At.
See, that's what I said. Mm-hmm. Katie said she thought it was about. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
Well, Allison should know.
What is internet anyway?
Internet is that
massive computer
right.
network.
The one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
Yes. That is exactly how it feels to try to understand Bitcoin right now, because we are so in the early days of this. It's like trying to build the roads before you had cars. First, you need to build the roads, and then you'll build the cool things that go on top of them. And right now, we are in the road building days of this technology. It is early. We are the modem, trying to connect via your phone line to the internet days. We are not at the, we're not where we are now. It's going to take a long time. Andreas writes on page 77, trying to empathize and to make this clearer. He says that, even after a couple of years of exploring this question of what is Bitcoin, you're going to still be learning. You're still going to be trying to understand what it is. Part of the reason for this is, because Bitcoin's a new technology. It's a really disruptive technology, but it's also an abstraction on a technology that is really old. That technology is money. Money is a tool. It's a technology. It actually shares commonalities with linguistic structures because we use it almost like a language to communicate value among ourselves in a society. So it's here that Andreas gives us his 4-word short answer for what Bitcoin is. Ready? Bitcoin. Bitcoin is digital money. Bitcoin is digital money. That's it. That's how he explains it. But then he goes a little bit further and he says, yes, Bitcoin is digital money, but it's so much more. And I love this quote here. He says, saying that Bitcoin is digital money is like saying the internet is a fancy telephone. It's like saying that the internet is all about email. Money is just the first application. Bitcoin is a technology, it is a currency, and it is an international network of payments and exchange that is completely decentralized. Whoa! A lot of words there, a lot of new words, right? What are we hearing there? We're hearing money is an application. We're hearing decentralized. We're hearing something about a network. There's a lot of words in there. Let me break that down, okay? So this idea of money being the first application, Bitcoin being digital money. What he's saying there is that Bitcoin isn't just one thing. It's at least 2 things. Bitcoin is, and I'm going to break this down for you. Number 1, Bitcoin is number 1, digital money. Okay, cool. That means you could perhaps buy things with it, send it to people. It has value. It's digital money. Number 2, it's a technology. Aha. And that's where things get really interesting to Andreas, but also to me too, and I think to most of the world. And I think that's a lot of the misconception that people come to understanding Bitcoin with. People have heard stories, and just small pieces of the story, and they hear the digital money side. But the technology part, that is especially where things get interesting. And he makes this really cool analogy. I just read it for you, but he makes this really cool analogy. He says, money is the first application. And when he said that, when I was reading this, I was thinking about, do you remember the first iPhone? I don't know if you even remember because it was like decades ago, but the first iPhone came out and it didn't really have any apps on it. Do you remember that? It didn't have any apps. It just had like a few that Apple put on there, like YouTube and email. Those were considered apps. But now, of course, all the apps, right? We just stare at them all day. Every app you can think about. You can upload photos, send money. You can do anything, schedule things, right? So the way that he thinks about Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is like an app on your phone. I would give that analogy. It's like sending money. It's like Venmo, right? It's like PayPal, whatever you want. And he's saying, but because of the underlying technology being so cool, he's like, all of these other things are now possible. And that's what he writes about a lot in this book, what that possibility is. On page 25, he writes, when people call Bitcoin a digital currency, they're missing the point. The euro is digital currency. The US dollar is digital currency. Less than 8% of these currencies exist in physical form. The rest is bits on ledgers. But the fundamental difference is that these ledgers are controlled by centralized organizations, whereas in Bitcoin, they're not. Bitcoin has a decentralized network, an open network. Okay. So it's here that Andreas is now talking about the technology of Bitcoin quite a bit. So remember, Bitcoin's 2 things. Number 1, it is a digital currency. And number 2, it's a technology. And there's a name for this technology. It's called blockchain. You've probably heard that before. Blockchain is the technology that allows Bitcoin to run on it. right? And the cool thing about this is that blockchain is kind of analogous to your iPhone in that example I gave. Blockchain can also run other applications on it. And I'm not going to go too much into what those are, but just understand that you can do a lot of other things, whereas money is just the first thing. Well, let's talk about this blockchain technology. Why is this so revolutionary? He's talking about there's a lot of vocabulary in there, and he's talking about, well, the first thing he talks about is this idea of decentralization. Decentralization. What that means and why that's so revolutionary is I want you to think now about where your money is. Your money, right? It's maybe in your wallet. You have some money in your wallet, and maybe you have some money in the bank, right? The money that's in the bank, that you have in the bank, a lot of people will say, yeah, I have my money in the bank. But the actuality of it is that you don't really have money in the bank. I mean, unless you actually have a pile of dollar bills that you have in a suitcase in a safe somewhere, usually when you bring your money to the bank, if you bring your money to the bank, they just take it and they just record the amount you gave them. And they record it on what is more or less a ledger. This is a word that you hear a lot when we talk about recording money in banks and with Bitcoin, a ledger. So the ledger, if you think about it as your bank account, when you log online, you go to Bank of America, you see your bank account. That's basically your ledger, and you log on and it says, hey, you have this much money, you spent this much money. It's a record of your money. Got it? That's pretty normal, right? We do that all the time. Now here's the thing. That is a centralized ledger. Centralized meaning who owns it? You don't own it. Bank of America owns it. And Bank of America gives you access to view it. It's the common way that things have been done for so long. Now, the benefit here of using blockchain technology, the innovation here is that with the Bank of America example, they have control of your records, right? They're a single party that has control, which means they're vulnerable to hackers. Banks are getting hacked all the time. They have access to see how much money you have. Anybody at Bank of America, if they work there, perhaps, can look and see your personal records. The government can get in and see your records. With blockchain technology, there's no single party control. Actually, the way the technology works is that everybody, you and everybody on the network, has a copy of the records, right? And so the way that works is that everybody has a copy, but it's encrypted in a way that more or less only you have access to see your records, right? The reason that everybody has a copy is because it keeps things honest. It keeps things honest such that if I make an update if I send money to you and I make an update on my record, you have to also update your record. So I can't just go ahead and say, hey, I have an extra $1,000 here, because every time you make a change, and this is another important thing, every time you make a change with your record, it's irreversible and it updates everybody else's record. You maybe have to think about that for a second to think about how revolutionary and amazing that is. But it's this idea that everybody has the same record of this entire history of money being sent. And again, the cryptocurrency, the cryptography part of it, is a way that you can access and send and receive your money and, have that kind of privacy, right? That is, Bank of America doesn't have it anymore. The government can't access it anymore. It's completely yours. So that's what he means in this last bit that I read you. That's what he means when he says that these ledgers are controlled by centralized organizations, whereas in Bitcoin, they're not. Bitcoin has a decentralized network. That's the decentralized network that you'll hear about when you're talking about Bitcoin and blockchain. This idea that not one person owns it anymore, right? Another analogous example might be with Facebook. Facebook is, can you guess? Facebook, yeah. They are a centralized organization. They are a centralized server. They have all your data, right? You can't take your Facebook data, your Facebook likes data, and bring that over to Airbnb. You can't take your Airbnb reviews. I mean, how much does it suck that you get all these reviews on Airbnb? People say you're wonderful, and then, you go to Craigslist and you have no credibility. With blockchain technology, you own your data. You can do anything you want with it, and you can port it around to different sites and different places on the internet. I'm going a little bit further here than the book goes, but this is kind of the promise. I kind of want to show you the promise of what's possible. Another application might be voting, right? That I could vote, and then it's irrefutably me, because when I vote, everybody's record gets updated. As opposed to now, if I go and vote, I go and one place, downtown or the Capitol building or whatever has a record, and then they can go and potentially, I don't know, lose the records, change the records. This is an open, transparent system that takes the power away from centralized authority and spreads it around to the people that actually use it. And not only that, it gives them more control and privacy, which is another great benefit. So, that's what he's saying here, again, with this idea of Bitcoin is decentralized. And I think that's pretty important. The second major theme of the book, Internet of Money, is the benefits of Bitcoin. Many of these talks here, they really just bring you, what are the benefits of Bitcoin? How do we break that apart? So I'm going to break that apart for you here with the top 4 benefits that Andreas talks about in the book. Number one benefit, Bitcoin protects your money from inflation. Okay. So the main point here is that with money as we have it now, countries inflate your money. They make more money and put it into the system, right? They can actually make money. And when they make money, of course, your money becomes a little less valuable. In America, we say something like 3% every year, right? Like if you don't get a raise every year, you're losing 3% of your money because money is getting devalued every year. With Bitcoin, that's not the case. It's not the case because there's a finite amount of Bitcoin that will ever be created. It's kind of like gold. That's kind of the analogy here. When there was the gold rush, there was basically a point at which there stopped being more gold to mine, right? And there was a stopping point. And that's the idea with Bitcoin. By the year 2140, there is going to be a total of 21 million Bitcoin, but that is it. So we are slowly approaching a time where every year until then, a little bit more will get released. But at that point, there will be no more Bitcoin. And it's mathematically impossible to ever create more because that's the way the code was written. So here we're talking about inflation, right? And we're talking about this idea that Bitcoin, there's a finite amount, so it's not going to ever inflate. It's really solid. The value is going to stay solid. In addition, he says that, well, look, you don't own your money. The bank has your money, right? And we talked a little bit about that. And he says that this is especially problematic in countries, certain third world countries such as Cyprus, Greece, Venezuela, Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil. He says today, if you go into an ATM machine in one of those countries and you put your money in, well, I don't know, you might get it, right? These countries have had problems where the government has put a hold on giving the money to the people or stolen from the people, right? The people of that country. He says that there's over 100 countries over the last several decades that have discovered that one day you go to the bank and the bank doesn't want to give you your money. That's on page 18. So number one, Bitcoin protects you from inflation and from, well, you get to have your money. It's your money. Number two brings us to Bitcoin keeps your money more secure. So he writes here on page 32, he says, in security, we have this really funny term, which is a honeypot. A honeypot is a system that is designed to attract hackers. What bigger honeypot could you have than a financial network that has $6 billion on it? Yeah, so what he's talking about here is that example I was giving you about Bank of America. Think about it. Bank of America has, billions of dollars. They are so vulnerable to getting hacked. And where do they get all the protection to not get hacked? Well, they hire lots of developers. They hire the smartest people in the world. And who pays their salaries? Well, you do. That's where all these fees come from. Things like credit card fees, bank fees, a lot of this money, or a lot of the reason that these fees are so high is because it needs to pay for this man in the middle, this Bank of America, to keep running, right? And also, I'm not trying to pick on Bank of America specifically. It's just a bank that we recognize, so I'm just mentioning it. But that's the idea, is that Bank of America, as an example of a centralized bank, has to pay a lot of money to keep protection, right? And where does that money come from? It has to do with these big fees that you pay it. That's where they get their money from. And so he's saying, and benefit number two, he's saying your money is more secure. Your money is more secure with Bitcoin because of the cryptography it brings. And because your money is not all in one centralized place anymore, you own it. It's kind of like you have it underneath your bed, but you have it in a secure safe underneath your bed that only you can access. I guess that's kind of the feeling of it. It's not exactly like that, but that's kind of the feeling. But it's just basically not out there for the bank to have their hands on. It's actually yours. Benefit number 3 of Bitcoin is increased privacy. Andreas writes, "We live in a world where every individual transaction you do through the financial system is cataloged, analyzed, and transmitted to intelligence all around the world." Yeah, intelligence all around the world that will collaborate, and, well, we have no idea what our governments do with the money. Benefit number 4, the fourth and final benefit that I'm giving you, is likely the most powerful benefit and the most exciting thing about Bitcoin, the thing I'm really excited about. And this is that, number 4, Bitcoin gives 6 billion people access to a global bank. Let me read from the book here, page 43. Andreas writes, "There are 2 billion people who have no bank account at all. There are another 4 billion people who have very limited access to banking." So that's 6 billion total. Banking without international currencies, banking without international markets, and they're banking without liquidity, meaning that they can't really access their money. It's not liquid, right? They can't grab it. It's tied up in things. Okay. Banking isn't about the 1 billion. That's us, probably, if you're listening. Banking isn't about, just about America, not about Europe, but banking is about the other 6.5 billion. The people who are currently cut off from international banking. What do you think happens when you suddenly are able to turn a simple text messaging phone in the middle of a rural area in Nigeria, connected to a solar panel, into a bank terminal, into a Western Union remittance terminal, into an international loan organizing system, or a stock market, or an IPO engine? Well, at first, nothing. But give it a few years. When I was traveling in Cambodia about 10 years ago, I remember it was in Phnom Penh, and I went to the ATM to get some money. And I was so surprised. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but I was so surprised when I put in my credit card in the ATM machine, dollar bills came out, American dollar bills. And actually, I'd been living in Asia for a year, and I hadn't seen a dollar bill in at least a year. So I just remember I thought I was just like tripping. What is going on? There's green US dollar bills coming out of this Cambodian vending machine. Later I learned that there is this problem with trusting, national currencies for some countries. Of course, I didn't know that. I was just in college at the time, but I didn't know that. But now I'm learning a lot about that and what that means. And if you read this book here, you're going to learn a lot about, how 6 billion people around the world don't have access to banking the way that we do. Even more so, there's this idea of remittances, which you may or may not be familiar with. The idea of remittances is that, there's people, let's just use Cambodia as an example. There's people in Cambodia who may go and work in America and send money back to their family. That's a common practice, right? You go abroad, you're going to make more money that you're going to make in Cambodia, and you're going to send it back. That's called a remittance. The idea there is when you send the money back, you need to send it from US dollars into maybe the local currency, right? And when that happens, you lose so much money. Western Union is one of the biggest remittance companies, right? Companies like Western Union, I think they take about $550 billion that they make every year, or that they transfer every year through their system, right? And they're taking, 9% of every remittance that goes through there of that money. Okay, 9%. I don't know, that could be, $10 or something like that. Like, who knows what it is? If you're sending $100 and you have to pay $9, that's a lot of money, right? Especially if you're, just trying to feed your family and working minimum wage, who knows, right? So this Bitcoin, when Bitcoin comes around to these countries, people are getting excited about it because now they can send money back to their families, and the fees are exceptionally low. And it sends instantaneously. You don't have to wait for Western Union to send it, for it to clear, to get IDs, to get authorization. It puts power in these people's hands. And you can do it from a simple, a phone, from a cell phone too. You don't need to have an elaborate setup or IDs or, whatever it is to get into these systems, to make it legal for them to take a cut, all those kind of things. The money is yours and you can send it freely. And that is really powerful. It's powerful for a lot of these countries, for 6 billion countries. But I was also surprised to learn in this book as well that in America, apparently 60 million people don't even have bank accounts, right? Whether it is that they don't have good credit or, they're not able to save enough money from their paychecks or whatever. But this is a way that everybody can have a bank account, and it's instantaneous, it's free, and the fees are low, right? To send it and to receive it. And also it's not going to inflate over time. So you get to keep your money. And that is one of the most powerful benefits of Bitcoin. All right, I really hope you enjoyed the Internet of Money. If you got something from this episode, you might want to go ahead and read this book. It is, like I said, only about 133 pages. I'll put some links on the website, on-books.com, as well as some of the videos. If you'd rather just watch some of these videos, they're free on YouTube. Go ahead and do that. That's an option for you as well. Other things that we didn't cover that we could have covered in the book are he goes and talks about the history of money, which is really interesting to think about how, things like we used to trade stones and metals, and even in the Netherlands they traded tulips as a currency, which is like the most adorable way to owe someone money. Hey, some tulips, right? Until they die, I guess. But he also goes and talks about scaling Bitcoin, like the future of it, and a lot of other different issues with security, and of course how Bitcoin is going to help empower the 6 billion people around the world. So those are some other things that are in this book. It is a great book. If you want to learn more about Bitcoin with me, I have a course online that you can take at onemonth.com. I'll give out a discount for anyone listening right now. That would be onemonth.com/onbooks. So onemonth.com/onbooks, and I'll send you a discount. You can take my online course where we'll look at Bitcoin, Ethereum, altcoins, how to buy, send, and receive Bitcoin, and how to store it securely. Those are things that I think are really important. So it's a 2-hour online course, and you can check that out. If you have any questions for me, if you have any feedback on the podcast or anything that you'd like to hear in the future, you can email me directly. I'm chris@on-books.com. And next week, we'll be looking at the number 4 book of the past year. So this was the number 5 book, my selection of the past year, The Internet of Money. Next week, we'll look at number 4. And over the following 5 weeks, we'll count down to the number 1 book of the past year. So until next time, this has been On Books. On Books!